My name is Patience Purdy. I'm the Director of Strategic and Program Initiatives here at the EDA, and we're thrilled that so many of you could join us here today. In just a few minutes, we'll, like I said, give it a little bit more time for some more folks to join. It looks like there's going to be close to 300 of you. We're going to walk through the application that you'll be starting either Thursday, Friday, or Monday, depending on what type of business you are. So really happy that you could all join us. We're going to answer as many questions of yours as we can in the time that we have. And then we're also going to post this on the cv.business.nj.gov portal, where you'll be able to access it going forward. The portal is also a great place for you to get some information on this application going forward. So that being said, we're right here. Let's see, what time is it? Should we give folks a little bit more time? It is 11:03. I think we'd like to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Bruce Alella, who is our Senior Vice President here at the NJEDA, and he is going to walk you through. For Q&A, you can put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. And we will do our best to get to as many as possible. I think we've allotted ourselves an hour here, so hopefully we can get to all of them. Thanks so much, and I'll turn it over to you, Bruce.
Thank you, Patience. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I see we're over 300, which is great. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through the application. I'm going to give you everything that you're going to need in order to fill out this application. I truly believe by the end of this, you'll feel much more comfortable if you already don't feel comfortable. And we'll get through this process. I will leave plenty of time for the Q&A. I will give kind of commentary on what the question actually means and what we're looking for. And with that, I'm going to get started here and share my screen. Let me know when everyone sees my screen. Can you see it?
I can see it.
Excellent. Okay, so this should look familiar to a lot of people if you've pre-registered. Let me just do one more quick plug on pre-registration. You need to click that submit button by 5 p.m. Today. It's Eastern Standard Time in order to be eligible for the full application process. So if you have not pre-registered yet, please do so immediately following this webinar, and to make sure that you can at least apply for the full application process. Okay, so with that, for those that have pre-registered already, you're going to go back to our application center. We will provide a link in both the business portal, both on our website, and you can save it on your computer, or you can go to your history and find it. But ultimately, when you come in to apply for the application, whether it's on Thursday morning, Friday morning, or Monday morning, you are going to go into the sign-in. You don't need to re-register. You don't need to redeem an invitation. You're going to go to sign in with your username and password. Please, 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 whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, but definitely before early in the morning when you are actually going to go to apply to the program, please go in, go the username, do the password. If you forget your username, click this button here. You only need to click it one time. You're going to get a link that's going to tell you either your username and how to reset your password. Just please write down the username, write down the password. The last thing I want to see happen is at 8:58, you're scrambling because you forgot your username or password. So please, please, please go in beforehand and write it down and make sure you can sign in. So when you type in your username, you type in your password. And again, one last thing on the username, it does not need to be the email address. I chose my email address as the username, which is why you see it here, but it does not need to be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign in. And this is when you sign in, it's going to take you to your grant application page here. And what you're going to see is the language is going to be a little bit different from pre-registration. You'll see here that we talk about the restaurants being at 9 a.m., the micro business being at 9 a.m. on Friday, and the small business being at 9 a.m. on Monday. So what's going to happen is when you come into your application portal here, you're going to see this status reason, and you'll see here in red, to start your application, please click on your organization name. in the row with the status in process, full application. So you're going to see here the status reason. And for my micro sample, it says pre-registration submitted. For my sample restaurant, you're going to see in process, full application. And for my sample small business, you're going to see pre-registration submitted. I am pretending right now that it is 9 a.m. on Thursday morning and I am a restaurant. Once 9 a.m. clicks, this status is going to change from that pre-registration to submitted to in process full application. So on Friday at 9 a.m., this will no longer say pre-registration submitted. It's going to say in process full application. Okay, so we are pretending right now that it's 9 a.m. on Thursday morning and I am a restaurant. So in order to access my full application, I am going to click on the organization name right here, this link right here, across from where it says in process full application. So I'm going to click on that sample restaurant, and this is going to take me to my application to start filling out, okay? And you're going to see here that the general information is not going to be editable. This is just going to give you what you submitted on your pre-registration, right? So there's nothing to do here, and I'm going to click next. When I get to the next and it goes to the next piece, right, it's going to give me all of the various, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to switch this up for you so you can see the questions that, you know, here's all of my contact information. Here's the business address. Here's the organization details. Here's all of the pieces that I answered on my pre-registration, okay? And now, once I got through that pre-registration piece, which is you're not going to be able to edit, it's going to be there just the way that you saw it right there. It's going to take you to the application questions now. So the first thing you're going to see is COVID impact. Has your business had a negative revenue impact as a result of COVID? Understanding that everyone's applying for this program, understanding how businesses have been impacted so severely by COVID, I feel pretty confident that most of the businesses up here are going to be able to answer this question as yes. Okay. Then here, we're going to go to, as of today, what is your estimated revenue loss as a result of COVID? And we're going to put that number in, and we're going to say, now when we talk about revenue loss as a result of your business closure, reduction in sales, or lost contracts, this is a question that you answer truthfully. I usually, this time of the year, through 10 months of the year, would have $1 million in sales. I only have 100,000. Okay, then I have $900,000 worth of a loss. Or I was anticipating a huge contract coming through in July of this year that completely got stopped because of COVID. Okay, you count that towards what your revenue loss is, right? So all of those pieces can be counted when you are talking about what your estimated revenue loss is. It doesn't have to be precise to the dollar. We're just trying to understand the magnitude of revenue loss that you may have. Okay, so now the next question, once I click next, is going to be duplication of benefit affidavit. And what does this actually mean? Have you applied for any other programs and received funding? So have you applied for the phase 1 grant program? Have you applied to the EDA phase 2 program, or the SBA PPP Paycheck Protection Program, or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan? Have you applied to any of them? Yes, I have. Okay, great. If yes, what programs have you applied for? Right? This is just a pick list here, and this isn't all encompassing, right? So we have other, if you have, you know, if one of them you see here is not listed, but for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to say that I applied and was approved for a Paycheck Protection Program loan. So I'm going to click that. And when I click that, you're going to see another box pop up here, and it's just going to ask some questions about what your PPP loan was. So what's your status? Well, I was approved. Okay, and what was I approved for? I was approved for $100,000. Okay, and when was I approved? Now look, I understand that you might not know the exact date that you were approved, but if it's directionally correct, right? So I think it maybe was May 5th or 6th or 3rd. Putting in a date that's close is okay. We don't need to, if we go back and check and you put the 5th, but it was the 9th, that's okay. We just want to make sure that we understand at what point you are approved for this program. So I'm going to put the 5th here. And then what is the purpose of my PPP? What did I use the money for? And I used it for payroll. Okay. So if we look at this screen here, what are we talking about? We're asking, have you applied for other assistance? Yes. If I answer yes to this, it's going to populate these other questions, and it's just asking me for what they are, right? So I have a PPP program. I was approved. This was my amount for approval. This was the approval date, and this was the purpose of my funds. Okay? So that's all that we're asking for here. Oh. So let's do this. Just to get through the test environment, I'll go through here. Okay, so now certification of need. All right, so here's your next question. What's my certification of need or use of funds? So what we're trying to understand here is the first question we asked, did you have a COVID impact on that first screen? The second was, well, what other assistance have you received? Now we want to know, what are you going to do with this money? Okay, and tell us more about how your business was impacted. So the first question is, was your entity deemed essential as defined by Governor Murphy's executive order? This is an informational purpose question only. It can be a yes, it can be a no. It's going to have no impact on your award. We just, for informational purposes, want to know if you were defined as essential. So if I answer yes to this question, okay, great. And have I been able to remain open or reopen since March 9th of 2020? Again, what we're trying to understand here is, were you able to, have you either remained open or are you going to reopen? We cannot fund a business. One of the requirements of the program is that we are going to fund a business that is either open or plans on reopening if they get these funding, right? So I'm going to say, yes, I plan on reopening, or I am reopened. And to what capacity have you been in operation? Well, this question here, to what capacity, and sometimes this confuses people, but to what capacity have you been in operation? I'm going to use a couple of examples. And again, this is a strictly informational purpose only type of question, will not have an impact on your award. But if we look at this, to what capacity have you been in operation? Well, I've been in operation 100%. My doors have been open, which is great, but my customers haven't returned. That's okay. If you've been open 100%, you can answer 100%. Or maybe you're a restaurant and I haven't been able to open my indoor dining, but I've been able to do takeout. Okay, then maybe you want to say I've been in operation 50%, right? So this is just a question to say, based on to what extent you as a business owner, do you believe that your capacity has been in operation? Again, informational purposes only. I'm going to say 50% for the purposes of just getting through the test application that I have here. And then this next question, and this is an important one, is after receiving the potential duplicative funding listed on the duplication of benefit, does your company still have a financial need? What this question is asking is, as a business, do you still need help in order to continue as a result of COVID? And again, I think a large majority of the businesses out there are going to answer yes to this question. Okay, so now we answer yes to this question. And what I want to know now is, okay, I need more funding because my revenues are down and I need to pay rent, or I need to pay payroll, or I need to pay my electric bill, all of those things. Well, how much additional funding is needed for your business? Well, I need an additional $10,000. I need an additional $100,000, right? This here is just telling us to what magnitude of an award can we provide you. All right, so this, I don't want this question to trip people up. What we're trying to say here is, and depending on what type of business you are, there's various degrees of funding you may receive. If you're a micro business, you'd be eligible for $5,000. If you're a small business, you'd be eligible for $10,000 or $15,000, depending on how many employees you have. If you're a restaurant, you'd be eligible for $10,000, $15,000, or $20,000, depending on how many employees you have. What we're trying to say here is, okay, my business is eligible for $5,000. We want to make sure that your need is at least $5,000 or more, because we don't want to give you too much money, right? I know it may sound awkward when I say that, but ultimately we're just trying to understand what is your financial need right now. Well, I need $50,000. Okay, great. No matter what that answer is, right? That is more than I'd ever be able to qualify for. You may only need $1,000. If you only need $1,000, that's great. That would be the award size we're going to give you is $1,000 because that's how much you need. You may have qualified for 5,000, but you only need 1,000. So that's what we're going to give you in the award, because we don't want to give you more than you actually need, because there's others who may need it. Okay. Again, we want you to answer this question honestly and truthfully. We also understand that there's a lot of funding that you may need that you never thought of, that, you know, whether it's PPE stuff, whether it's, you know, you have janitorial services come in more than normal. That's an additional expense. That creates additional need that you know, this unmet need concept of I need more funding just as a result of that. So that's why we're going to put through here what this amount is. If you put less than what you would be entitled to, you're going to get a warning that says you may be entitled to more. We just want to confirm that that is the correct answer. Okay, so again, this is a really important question because this is going to determine, if you're approved, what your award size is going to be, right? It can never exceed the amount that you are entitled to, but it can always be less if your need isn't there. And then we ask the question, what is your business going to use these funds for? So for this purposes, I'm going to say we're going to use it for payroll. Okay, but you can check every one that applies. We're going to go to the next question. And now this is the question of religious affiliation. For most of the entities out there, you are not going to answer this question as a yes. What we're referring to here are churches, synagogues, things along those lines, those type of 501(c)s that do have a religious relationship. We're not talking about someone that is, you know, I think I've seen an example of like a DJ that does bar mitzvahs, or a DJ that does, you know, christenings or communions or weddings or something to that effect. That's not a religious, you may do religious events, but what we're asking for here is, do you have a religious affiliation like a church or something along those lines? If the answer to this question is a yes, there's going to be additional information that we're going to need. But for the majority, I'm going to answer this question as a no, just to get through the application, because I think a majority of the people are going to answer this as no. And remember, this is not I perform services at religious events. This is more, I'm a church, I'm a synagogue, I'm a religious school, something to that effect. Similarly, as we think of the religious question, we're going to ask this lobbying question. And the reason we're asking these religious and lobbying questions are both for state and federal law purposes. Because we are an authority of the state, we do need to abide by we need to abide by all the state laws, but there are restrictions on religious funding we can provide. And same thing on the lobbying side, there are federal restrictions because this is federal CARES Act money of lobbying or political purposes. That's the reason that we ask these questions. Again, most people are going to answer this question as a no. So I'm going to answer this as no again. Understanding that if you do answer this as a yes, and it's a very small subset of businesses, I think it was less than 1% in our other phases of the programs we've had here at the EDA. But it's just going to say that there's going to be an additional questionnaire that you need to fill out before we can go through the approval process. Okay, so now the next question, and this is additional information. This is our legal questionnaire. These are legal questions that, as I said, as a state authority, we need to ask and are required to ask. We need you to answer these truthfully. This does not mean that you will not be eligible for the program. It just means that if you answer yes to any of these questions, we're just going to need an explanation as to what exactly happened. I had I don't know, I was arrested for something 15 years ago, and everything has been expunged from my record. Okay, that's fine. Just whatever question may be applicable to you, please answer it truthfully, and it'll go through the process. What will happen is, whether if your answer is detailed enough, you will be able to, our legal group may contact you after for additional information, or it might just go through the approval process. Just please be aware, please answer this truthfully. As you know, everything that you are answering here, you're certifying to be true and accurate, and can be punishable by all extents of the law as a state authority, as well as having federal funds involved. For the purposes of, again, getting through the application, I'm going to answer no to these questions. Okay, Privacy Act statement release. This here is just allowing us to make sure that we can share with our sister agency, the Division of Taxation, information about your business, so we can validate tax clearances, revenues, things along those lines, to make sure everything you're saying is truthful and accurate. So this is just that certification. And the last piece here is going to be a certification. This is the last real question of the application, and this is the certification of the application. And here again, you're just acknowledging that everything I'm answering I understand that if such information is willfully false, I'm subject to criminal prosecution, right? I allow the Department of Law and Safety to review these records. I'm going to best efforts not to furlough. I've been negatively impacted by COVID, and we've asked that question multiple times on this application. I certify that I have a material need. This question here, we get a lot of questions on, because it gives an example of does not have significant cash reserves that can support the firm during the period of economic disruption. I just want to kind of give a second on this one, because I don't want it to confuse people. What we don't want to see is, we don't want to see hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could have used in cash reserves that you were saving for a time like this in order to get your business through this, right? We want to help the people that really need the help. I think in a lot of instances, most businesses want to have a cash reserve because they just never know what's going to happen. Maybe there's a cyclical change. Maybe there's a COVID, whatever it might be. We're not saying that a business has to completely exhaust all of their cash reserves. What we're saying is, if a business has millions or hundreds of thousands that could easily cover them during this period, we want to make sure we're helping those that are as great impacted as possible with this funding. We want to make sure the public purpose is going to those that truly need it. Okay. The next question is, you're certifying you're operational and in compliance with the laws. And again, this currently operational, we asked this question, are you currently operational, or are you going to reopen? Right? If you're going to reopen, you're still in operations in a way. You're just planning on how your reopening strategy. If you are closed and you never plan to reopen, this program is not a reimbursement for the past couple of, or 6 to 9 months. This is to help businesses that are planning on reopening or have already reopened. We're asking if you're in good standing with taxation. We're asking if you're fully and properly registered. Please make sure you're fully and properly registered, or you're going in the process of being fully and properly registered. The last thing I want to have happen is for somebody to get an award and then we find from the Division of Taxation that they were not properly registered and aren't in the process, and we may be seeking repayment of the grant. I don't want that to happen to any business. I know every business out there believes or thinks that they are properly registered, and we understand that. Just please double check that you are properly registered. You can go to our FAQs and there's a link to see if you're properly registered. This is really important. I don't want to see anything happen or have a clawback or anything like that of the funding. Again, I authorize the EDA to provide information on behalf to any of our sister agencies. These are our sister agency checks that we use. I acknowledge that I also can be prosecuted under federal law. Again, we talked about the state law up here, we talk about the federal law up here, and then I authorize an electronic signature shall be binding on both parties. This here, you've got to check all of these in order to, affirmatively say that this is correct. Again, please, answer these truthfully to get through the application. And lastly, as we go through here, here's the signature page. I'm bound to electronic signature. I am the authorized signer for the organization. You must be an authorized signer in order to do this. I'm going to put my name as test account. I am going to tell you that I'm about to hit next. We are in the process of updating the confirmation page. So if something, we are in the test environment. So that's why you may have seen some errors pop up or something along those lines. It's just because we're in the test environment. I am not in the live environment. I can't be in the live environment because, as we just talked about, the application will not go live until Thursday. So that is why we are testing this in the test environment. I will click next here. And then as we go through, it's processing. If we get the confirmation, great. I know that our application staff was working on that this morning. Great, here it is, my confirmation number. It's blank right now because I'm in the test environment. All communications are going to be mailed here. My full application has been submitted, and we are in good shape there. In order to now see where we are in the application, and it's going to let this process, and again, we're in the test environment. It's going to pull me back, right, to my applications. I can get back here by my applications by going right here to my applications when I'm signed in, my applications, COVID phase 3 grant. It comes here. And again, what you're going to see, and I hope everyone can see, is that the status reason for my micro is pre-registration submitted. For my sample small business is pre-registration submitted, but my sample restaurant is submitted. The reason is, remember, we started this by saying, I am pretending it's 9 a.m. on Thursday morning. This is why this link was available. 9 a.m. on Friday morning, this pre-registration submitted is going to be in process full application. When you see that, you would click on this micro here and go through the steps of the application. So that was 30 minutes. I took a little longer than I wanted to, but I actually really wanted to go through and explain each question. So maybe that helps through the process. But now what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen, and I see that there's a significant amount of questions. So I'm gonna try to get through as many as I can, and hopefully we'll be able to bunch some together. And I'll promise I'll try to be as concise as possible in answering, but also giving you a full answer to help ease any pain or any anxiety that you may have. The last thing I do want you to understand is that the application itself, that submitting of the application, is on a first come, first served basis. Pre-registration was not, the full application is. So please be prepared with anything you may be needing. And again, my last plug, please log in prior, the day before, with your username, with your password. Come to my applications, come to COVID phase 3 grants, because I don't want you to be scrambling trying to figure out what that is at 9 a.m. I really want to give you the best opportunity to get this funding. So with that, I am happy to start taking questions, and Patience, I'm sure you're ready to fire away at me.
I am. And I'm going to do my best, Bruce, to bunch them together. I think the best place to start, because there are a number of questions regarding how my business is defined and how my full-time employees are calculated. I think I'm going to try and roll a bunch into one here, because I think that it's going to be the easiest way to do it. Okay. WR 30 versus 1099. If I'm over 50 in my highest out of the 6 quarters. So micro, small, restaurant, how do I define full-time employees? How do I count them? How are 1099s counted? If you can just dive into that.
Sure. So let me start by saying the first thing is, and I'm going to start with 1099s. The program, when we look at full-time equivalent employees, are focused on whether you filed a New Jersey WR 30 or you had an exception as to not file. And there's a very small subset of businesses that have that exception. They are 501Cs that some do not file. So let's put them aside. So let's say if you file a WR30, you have a W-2 employee, those are the ones that are counted towards this full-time equivalent, right? So I have 7 full-time W-2 employees. Great. Then that is your number 7. It's above the 5, it's 6 or above, so you'd be a small business. Your 1099s are not counted towards that full-time equivalent. You can go to our website and the FAQs, and there is a link to our calculator, which will describe for you what the full-time equivalent is based on your WR30 filing. So what you can do is you can type in everyone's wages, and it'll tell you, based on what you just entered, you have 9 full-time equivalent employees. So that's the part on how to calculate the full-time equivalent. If you have 7 full-time employees, you can put 7 full-time employees, and that's what they are, and that's great. You would classify as a small business. If you had, there's 2 separate questions that were on the pre-registration. You didn't see them on the full application. They were on the pre-registration. The first question was, in the last 2 quarters, how many full-time equivalent jobs did you have? Meaning, how many W-2 full-time employees did you have? If you answered anything 50 or less, you qualify for this program. And that is Q1 of 2020 or Q2 of 2020. If you had less than 50 in your most recently filed, then you qualify for this program. However, there was a separate question on the application that then asked, in the last 6 filed quarters, which went back from Q1 of 2019 to Q2 of 2020, what was your highest total of employment? And there you can answer 100, 150. That's okay, because your eligibility was based on your Q1 or Q2 2020, and your size is based on your highest of your last 6 quarters. And what we did there was we acknowledged that businesses over the last couple of months have either shut their doors or reduced employment. And as a result, we didn't want them to be penalized. We want to give them the funding that they need to get back in operational and survive this period. So when we come out of this, they're ready to go back to full operations. So to recap briefly, 1099s are not counted towards a full-time equivalent. W-2 employees are. If you're uncertain what your full-time equivalent is, please go to our FAQs and go to the grant calculator, and it'll show you there what your full-time equivalents are.
Okay, so I'm gonna skip over some of these and go straight to one that I think some folks are gonna want to get started on right away. If I made a mistake on my pre-registration, can I fix that if I've already hit submit?
So if you've already hit submit, and it's not a material mistake, if it's a minor mistake, if you, checked, if it said check all and you only checked 4 out of the 5, I would say that's okay. It's not going to have a material impact on the application. If you believe there's a material impact on your application, please, in the next, as soon as this webinar is over, please contact customer care or the phone lines. Probably customer care probably would be the easiest with an email. Please put in the subject line that you have to revise your full application. We can open that for you for revisions. It is imperative to understand that you need to click submit again. Once we open it for revision, you need to go through the process, through every single question. You don't have to change every single question, but you need to go through all of the steps and make sure you click submit again. If you do not click submit by 5 p.m., your application will not be considered valid, and you're not going to see it in the portal when you're supposed to come on, whatever time frame might be, Thursday, Friday, or Monday. So if it's material, please send an email almost immediately. If it's not material to the application, it's okay. If we have any issues, you always will have the opportunity to, there's 3 things that are going to happen. You've either going to go through a path that everything checks out with all of our sister agencies and we can go down an approval path, or we're going to go down a path where you're going to be contacted by one of our servicing officers to just ask some qualifying questions, or you may receive a declination. Receiving a decline is okay. You're going to have the opportunity to appeal that decision. So if you answered something and you look at it on the appeal and you're like, why did I answer it that way? That's okay. You're going to have the opportunity to appeal that decision, right? So nothing in this process, you're always going to have another opportunity to correct something in this process. So not material, I would say you're okay. If material, please contact customer care as quickly as possible. And please, please, please do not forget to click submit.
Several questions in here, Bruce, regarding how far into the future, and I think this goes back to when you gave the example of a big contract that was supposed to come through in June or July didn't come through. That's an expected revenue that we're not going to get. How far into the future do we look at that?
So it's going to be, I believe, and if not, I have to go back because I don't remember the question exactly. But we would be the moment in time that you are filling out the application. That is what we're talking about from a revenue perspective. We're not saying, hey, look forward 6 months and you're worried about that, the second phase of that contract maybe not hitting. It's as of today, as of this moment in time, how much lost revenue have you had from canceled contracts, loss of sales, loss of people coming into your shop, lack of supply chain for something. I usually am selling 1,000 widgets. I can only sell 10 because I can't get the other 990 because my supply chain is disrupted. All of those pieces, but it would be at this moment in time, how much of a lost revenue have you had?
Okay, I selected 2 options under services provided, but when I look back in my pre-registration, it says none of the above is selected. 2 things. Do I need to fix that? Is that an issue?
So when we say, was it a restaurant that was the question there?
I don't know the answer to that. That's
okay.
Not...
So again,
I'm guessing restaurant. I think that's where we asked that question.
So if your NAICS code began with 722 and you answered that it's showing as none of the above, I don't think that is a material piece that you would have to go back for a revision. Again, the absolute worst case scenario is that's not a reason for declination, right? If we had a follow-up question as to why you answered that, we will do that with a servicing officer, and it will be in very short order from when you click submit on the application. So we will, if we have any concerns with any answers to the application, we will make sure that we are reaching out to you. So for something like that, I don't think it's going to warrant the revision to the application.
Okay, a lot of questions about what are eligible uses of funds, what is considered working capital. Can you go into a little detail on that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep it very simple. Everything other than capital expenditures are eligible uses. What are capital expenditures? You cannot do construction. You cannot say, I'm going to take this money and build an additional wing off of my business. Or I'm going to take this money and buy an air conditioning unit that needs to be installed. Those type of things are not eligible because they would trigger other federal requirements. What are eligible are payroll, inventory, supplies, rent, PPE equipment, meaning face shields or more hand sanitizers or something along those lines. We categorize other working capital expenses because it's not an exhaustive list. It just cannot be something that requires construction related capital expenditures. That's the only thing that is not eligible for this program. It is a very broad definition.
Okay. There's a question in here that's very specific, and I think it's got something to do with just moving through the application. But you didn't use the first estimated revenue loss box. You used the revised one. I'm guessing that's because you're in a test environment and just needed certain things to show up.
I was in a test environment, and I actually had run through there before, and I had already answered that question and went back, which is why you were seeing it there. So that's a good question though, and I like that someone's paying that close of attention. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Put their mind at ease.
Exactly. No, so what's going to happen there is if it's a currency only field, and that's actually what I was trying to test. So I tried to write out $100 or $1,000, and it gave me the error message that this is a currency field and you need to put a dollar amount in there. So it's a numeric number you need to put in there. It needs to be, from $1 to whatever. You can't type in 200 or whatever it is. What happens is when you make an error, or when you get a warning message on any of the application pieces, it always stores your original answer and then gives you the opportunity to revise it. That's the only reason that you saw the one field that had a line in it, and then the revised is where I entered the actual information, because I was in the test environment and I was testing something to make sure it was working. But kudos to that person. I appreciate how closely you were watching.
And then folks are asking about, as far as duplication of benefits and other funds received, is it solely grant funds? Is it insurance? Is it, if I have a forgivable idle loan, do I include that? Do I include an idle loan that I've already paid back with interest? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. Any other COVID type assistance that you received, we need to be made aware of. It may not impact your award, but it needs to be disclosed to us. So what does that mean? That means that if you received business interruption through your insurance company, I have heard that has been an interesting situation, but maybe you have, so that's great. Yes, you would need to put that in there. You would need to put your economic injury disaster loan or the economic injury disaster grant. Even if you repaid back the loan already, please put that in there. It's not going to be, the loans are not going to be part of the duplication of benefit analysis. Again, we just need it listed there so that when we do our agency checks across various state and federal agencies, we just want to make sure that you've disclosed everything to us so that, there's no issues that, oh, I forgot to disclose something. And look, I understand people make mistakes and things will happen, but the last thing you want to get is an audit letter from us that just says, hey, we talked to SBA and we noticed that you received this, but you didn't put this on your application. Can you please, explain? So anything that you received that's COVID related, you would put on there. There is a pretty fair list on there. All of the SBAs on there, all of the phase 1 and 2 grants for the EDA are on there. Our COVID loan is on there. CARES Act funding from other local municipalities are on there. Insurance is on there. And then there's the bucket other category. So yes, anything that you received, please list it for full disclosure.
I just want to address something really quick here. We have some folks asking about registering for multiple clients, and it's defaulting to the previous client. I'm going to guess that person's probably logging in with the same username and password, which defaults to a specific profile that was originally set up under the first client registered. So what I'm going to suggest is if you want to email customer care at njeda.com, we can take a look at that. But if you're not using a different username and password and email address for each of them, then there is going to be some crossover there, right? I can have a username and password and set up multiple locations under that one profile, right?
Yes. So when you log in and you hit pre-registration and you click submit, it is tied to that username and password that set up that information. For some, I know that they may have put their EIN number in and then they tried to start another registration and it's telling them that email's already in the system. Yes, the system is stopping you if there's been an instance of that EIN already going through the process. So what'll happen is, as Patience just said, when you log in with that username and password, if you filled out 3 locations, all 3 will be right there. If you have 5 locations, all 5 will be right there. If you filled out something for somebody else as an authorized signer for a business and it's multiple businesses, you are going to see every single business that you pre-registered under. It's all tied to that username and password. And those links, again, the links will become available depending on how you answered the questions on your pre-registration. So if you answered that you were a small business and you provided that you had over 6 employees, full-time employees, you're going to be Monday, November 2nd. If you said that my NAICS code begins with 722, you're going to be Thursday. And for everyone else, 5 and under, or don't have a WR30 or only 1099 employees, you're a micro business, that's going to be on Friday.
And when you say don't have any employees, like 0 employees, it's just me. It's my business. I'm a sole proprietor. I don't pay myself. So I'm a 0. 0's fine. I'm a micro, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I got an email saying that I hadn't finished, that my pre-registration was still in process, but I know I submitted. Why might I have gotten that email?
Sure. So the one reason you may have gotten that email is you may have tried to open up multiple pre-registrations. Maybe something happened, you stepped away, you came back, and you opened up another registration. So it's very possible that you could have submitted and have one that's in process just because you hit the pre-registration link twice. What I would say, and I started with this and I will end with this, and I'm not ending right now, I promise, but I am going to end with this at the end too. Use your username, use your password, go back to that portal and click on My Applications COVID Phase 3 grants. When you click on that link, when you go there, you're going to see every single thing with the status that you may have opened. So if you believed you've submitted something, it will show you pre-registration submitted. Great, you're done. You may also see one that says in process. Well, that one hasn't been submitted, and it might just be because you created a duplicate, and that's okay. Let that one sit because you've already submitted the one for your business. That is completely fine. When you come in on Monday or Friday or Thursday, Friday, or Monday morning, those in process won't be there anymore. It's only going to be those that are submitted. And that's why it is so imperative that everyone submits by 5 p.m. But it's equally imperative. Go to the website, type in the username, type in the password, go to My Applications, and see what it says as the status. You're going to have to do it in order to apply. So I'd rather you be comfortable with it today. And if you have any issues, we can help you now.
Are we able to account for growth not realized as part of an impact due to COVID? Does lack of growth or growth not realized count as a loss of revenue?
So what I would say to that is if you had a business, and I'm going to use a very simplistic example, if you had a business that just moved into a brand new showroom or just built a brand new facility on March 1st, and then everything got shut down, and you were anticipating your revenue as a result of your new manufacturing floor, or all of this to go from 100,000 to 300,000, sure, that's lost revenue. If you were somebody that was planning on, but haven't done it yet, getting a new showroom in 2021, but now you're not thinking about doing that anymore, that's not the type of revenue growth that I would say is a loss that we're looking at. We're looking at something that has been somewhat way, shape, or form realized at this moment in time. And it could be you were anticipating it being much higher because they just moved into a brand new facility. I had a restaurant that was 10 tables. I just bought the one next to me, tore down the wall. I could hold 50 people in January or in February, and COVID hit. Yeah, you could anticipate that maybe your revenue was going to be 3 times as much, and you lost that. That is a good example of a revenue loss as a result of COVID. Thinking in your mind, hey, in 2021, I'm thinking about expanding my business, but now I'm not going to do that anymore. That's not the type of revenue that we would anticipate seeing somebody put into that category.
What's the timeline for funding if we're approved?
Well, I smile because I want to get it out to you as quickly as possible. So what I would say is that, and in the confirmation, you're going to see it, within 7 business days, we're going to put up on our portal what the status of your application is. We will start approving the week of November the 2nd. So that's when approvals will start. I would believe that by the 9th, we'll start really seeing approvals in earnest, getting the money out the door. Understanding that there's a very tight federal deadline. So we are increasing staff. We're doing everything we can to get this funding to you in short order. But the funding will start within 7 business days of submitting your application.
We have our business is registered in New Jersey, but our address is in New York, and it's not letting us submit that. What can we do?
So you have no employees in the state of New Jersey. You have no location in the state of New Jersey. You would need to have, in order to be eligible for this program, you need to have a location in New Jersey. For that example, it would be more considered if you're an online retailer and your business is in New York, you would be considered a New York business for this purposes. If you did have a physical location in the state of New Jersey, you would be eligible here.
Okay. We have 4 retail locations, but only 1 in New Jersey. We're only applying for the New Jersey location, but we got a PPP amount for all the locations. Do we divide by 4 for this application? It won't match the total amount we receive if you look up our PPP.
It's a great question. So disclose the full amount, because again, when we go to SBA and ask them for that information, if we go that route, there's going to be that discrepancy there. What I would say is, when you go through the process, the very next set of questions is going to ask for your financial need. That financial need, it would just be for the New Jersey location. But that issue of the PPP being split among others, that's okay. We want you to disclose the correct and full amount. And then this way, if there is any additional follow-up, we could always contact you. But again, we understand that and want you to answer that question truthfully, because we're going to pull it from SBA as well. And we don't want you to say it's a third of this because there's 3 locations. Similarly, I want to say, just as that's the same thing when you talk about jobs, it's based on your EIN number. So if your EIN and you file 100 employees with your EIN, that is the EIN we're using. Even if you have 4 locations under that EIN, we can't split it up and say this location gets 25, this location gets 25. It's based on EIN. So if the EIN is 100 for your W-2s, then that is what you have to enter for that answer.
Sorry, I'm trying to answer in the chat as we go through. It says, can you please post the link to access my applications? I want to remind everybody here on this webinar that cv.business.nj.gov is going to have this webinar, so you'll be able to watch it again if you missed anything. It has all the links that you need to get to anywhere that you need. It's got frequently asked questions. It's got that's my cat. So welcome to virtual home. It's got the pre-registration slides. If you want to look at that before you go in there, it's got the phone number you need to call, the email address if you're looking to get in touch with us. So cv.business.nj.gov. And then let me get back. I think we've answered most questions that seem to be very pertinent. How will funding reach me? There's no space for banking information on the application. That's a good question.
Sure. So what's going to happen is, once you submit your full application, we're going to do our sister agency checks, and then we're going to start decisioning applications. If you are approved, you will receive an email from us that says congratulations, and you're also going to receive an email from Adobe Sign. We utilize Adobe Sign for our grant agreements and for our electronic signatures. So what will happen is, in the grant agreement, there's going to be an opportunity for you to put your routing and banking information. Please double check your routing and banking information, because if you enter it incorrectly, it just delays us getting you the funding. But the banking and routing information will be part of the grant agreement that you need to sign once approved, and that'll be coming through Adobe Sign. You will also receive a congratulations email from the EDA, so you'll receive them almost simultaneous. So you'll be on the lookout for
Here's a question I haven't seen before. I have a state EIN number and an FEIN number. Which do I enter?
Great question. So if you file under your state EIN, please put the state EIN in that category. If you file under your federal EIN, so if you are a Schedule C or a single member LLC or whatever it might be, and you just utilize your federal, please use that. But if you file with the state of New Jersey under your state EIN, and in most instances for most businesses it's the same, but I'm assuming in this case it's different, please provide your state EIN. Again, if you had already provided your federal EIN, that's okay. We can ask that clarifying question at a different time. But if you have not done your pre-registration yet, please use the state EIN.
We have one EIN for our payroll, which cost is allocated to other business entities. We have other costs that are incurred in these other entities that have been severely infected. I'm sorry, I don't see a question there. If you want to try and re-enter that. Do we include the $ or not when we put numerical amounts into requested monies amounts?
No $signs. Just put the number in. It knows that it's a currency field.
And can you reiterate the dates for each restaurant, micro and small?
Sure. So 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, October 29th is restaurants. So if you registered as your business category as restaurant with a 722 beginning NAICS code, you are Thursday, October 29th at 9 a.m. If you are a business that has 5 or fewer full-time equivalent employees, then you are Friday, October 30th at 9 a.m. And if you are 6 or more full-time employees, then you are Monday, November 2nd at 9 a.m. Please note it is first come, first serve. If you were to look at our board memo and the approved programs, there's allocation buckets for each bucket of funding. So I don't want someone to think that, hey, the restaurants are going to get all the money up front. No, they have their own allocation, just like micro has their own allocation and small business has their own allocation. It is first come, first serve, meaning whoever submits first is going to, be first in line and so forth and so on. And it is, those buckets will be impacted accordingly. You can fill it out whenever. It'll be open for 7 business days. But if you submit at, if you're last in line, you would be last in line. It will be first come, first serve. There also is a 33% allocation to eligible opportunity zones. So there's a set aside for eligible opportunity zones as well if you are in those areas.
Here's a good question, I think. Is there a chance that
They're all good questions, Patient.
No, well, yes, they are. Is there a chance people will try to submit before their appropriate date? For example, a small business try to apply on Thursday during restaurants, and what happens then?
Sure. So when you go to that My Application piece in the portal, by using your username and password, please do it. Use your username and password. Go to the My Applications. Depending on what type of business was put into the pre-registration, the link will not be available to them to fill the application out. So for instance, if you would, in the beginning, you saw that mine said pre-registration submitted, and the only one that said in process full application was the restaurant one, because I was pretending it was 9 a.m. in the morning on Thursday. So once 9 a.m. comes, that link will update, and that'll give you the opportunity to click on your organization name and go through the application. If you come in as a small business on Friday on the micro, even if you click on that link, it's not going to take you to the application. It's just going to take you to your stagnant pre-registration that you've already filed.
So another couple of questions along this line. So I put 7 for my full-time employees, but it's really 9. Is that something I need to go in and fix?
No. So in an example like that, it's not going to have any impact on your award. If there was a significant difference, so for example, you put 70 and it should have been 7, you accidentally hit the 0. Yes, that is something that you would want to correct. If you put 20 and it should have been 200, yes, that is something you want to go correct. But if it's off by a number or two, it's not a material impact. What I would say is, though, however, there are certain key trigger numbers that you need to be aware of, right? So if you look at our board memo, 0 to 5 employees is one bucket of funding. 6 to 25 is another bucket of funding. 26 to 50 is the last bucket of funding. So if you put in 24 and it should have been 27, that could be something you want to go fix, because that could have an impact on your award. But if you put 19 and it should have been 20, it's not going to have an impact on the award. It's going to be close to what the numbers are pulling from labor. It's not going to create any issues on our end on the review process. Does that make sense, patients?
Yes, that makes sense. And that's what I was hoping you'd define. And then I think we're going to do this one last question just to reassure everybody, because I think it's important that everybody is reassured on this. Will there definitely be some money available for small businesses come Monday? Or because this is first come, first serve, is it possible that all the money will be gone before 9 a.m. on November 2nd?
So what I would say is, if you are a small business, at 8:59 a.m. on Monday, November 2nd, there is a full bucket of funding just for you. Even if restaurants used all of their bucket already and micro used all of their bucket already, there is a separate bucket for a small business. For each single program, there is an allocation. And you can go and view all of that information on the business website that Patience has given out a couple of times. But no, do not have a fear that the restaurant or the small businesses are going to be negatively impacted because they're going last. You have your own separate bucket of funding that will be allocated towards.
I think we're going to call that our last question. Again, this webinar
is... Hold on. I said I was going to do it. Please. As soon as you get done this webinar, thank you so much. It means a lot to me that you guys are on here and ladies are on here, because I know this means a lot to you, and we are trying to help you, and we want to get you this grant funding, and we want to give you all the tools in order to do that. There's nothing that makes me happier than trying to help businesses get through this. But I implore you, please go to the website, go type in your username, go type in your password, go to the My Applications, make sure you have your pre-registration submitted, make sure you write it all down. I want to give you the money. I really, really do. And I don't want your business to be impacted because you forgot your password or you couldn't get to the page or something. Let's fix those issues now when there's time, because at 9:01, there's going to be, we know that this is going to be oversubscribed based on the pre-registration, right? So we want to give you the best opportunity to get this funding. So please, please, please go log into the system, make sure you can do it, write the information down, and you will be a step ahead come whatever time your business is going to open. And I wish everyone the best of luck. I really do. I hope everyone's healthy, safe. And I hope that, we, in 2021, we all have a good story to tell. And I hope that the EDA at least was able to provide some assistance to help you, because honestly, we are here to try to help you. Patience has been manning those phone lines and those email requests, and nothing makes us happier than trying to help people. So please be patient with us, but help yourself too by going in, logging in, writing the information down, and being extra prepared come whatever time your application opens. All right, with that, go ahead, Patience. Go ahead, you do your closing.
So quickly, the call center line is 844-965-1125. If you have already pre-registered and submitted your registration, I would hold off and call the call center tomorrow. Right now, we're working through trying to answer folks' questions who are trying to get through that pre-registration process. We are going to be there tomorrow all day as well. You can email customercare@njeda.com. If you have not pre-registered, or you have not finished pre-registering, you must do that by 5 p.m. If you are in process, if you have made a mistake, and looking through the questions on here, if you need to update something, if you need to get back into your application, you need to send that request now so we can get that open for you and you have time to submit by 5 p.m. As Bruce said, we want to get you that money. That's our goal. So help us get you that money, get your pre-registration submitted, and watch the webinar, review the FAQs online, and best of luck to all of you going forward. Thank you.